Hello and welcome back to Dream Big with Amy. Today's episode is a first for the podcast, and honestly, one I've been thinking about for a long time. I found Alex Greaner on TikTok and I stopped scrolling immediately because he was a man talking about masculinity, identity, and what it means to be good in a way I'd never heard a man talk about before. It's raw, honest, and zero performance. And I just knew I had to have him on the show. For the woman listening, this conversation is going to change how you see men in your life, the ones who've hurt you, the ones who've loved you, the sons you're raising, and the partners you're hoping for. For the men listening, I know that some of you are here, and the ones are for you. Finally, something that you're asking, and maybe the questions to your answers. Alex Green is a writer, a speaker, and a mentor who has dedicated his life to one question: what makes a good man? He works with parents, young men, and families navigating masculinity, purpose, and relationships in the modern world. And he has a story that starts with a jail cell at 18 years old. So, Alex, welcome to Dream Big with Amy. I'm so glad you're here.
Hi, Amy. Thanks so much for having me on, and I appreciate the introduction. You absolutely nailed it.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to have this conversation. I
Me
know we
too.
just spoke briefly before, but like I say, I saw you on TikTok and I was like, we need this conversation. This is so important. I've only spoken to women up until this point,
Okay.
and I think you have a really powerful voice, as we just spoke about, and how quickly you've grown in a short amount of time. Tells me something that there is a need for this in the world right now, and my energy to bring to you just how important this really is. So if you could take us back a little bit about, I just want to hear a little bit about your journey. I mean, the jail cell to me seems very interesting. And writing an apology letter to your younger sister, I would like you to tell us your journey.
Yeah, absolutely happy to. I had to go way back into the archives as I was putting together my website.
Mm,
Those experiences, although they're not too hard to find because they stick with you forever. I grew up in an upper middle class family, lots of love in the family, mom, dad, and as men, as boys, we are just natural risk takers. And during that teenage phase, we are looking for autonomy. We're looking, how to grow our competence in areas, but there's a lot of questions that are circling that we don't know how to answer. And one of the big
hmm
ones is really, who am I? And what is my service, to the people around me and to the world? We're big thinkers a lot of the times, and we have this like hero's journey, right? This rags to riches, and it's just this like constant narrative playing in the background. And long story short, yeah, I ended up getting into into the wrong crowds. I played football. I was always sports and athletic, and at the top of my game there. But then you start experimenting with other groups and other crowds, and I tried some weed here and there, and ended up paying a hard lesson for that. And it happened a couple times. One was on a date with a girl that I just met at a party, and it was very natural. It wasn't anything that I was doing, that someone would say, "Wow, he's a horrible kid" at the time. All of my friends were doing it. I just happened to get caught, and so that happened one too many times. And it was 3 days after my 18th birthday, after I had had two stints of going through a juvenile detention program and having to get myself out of those holes, and then again 3 days after my 18th birthday, I was pulled over for my tints here in South Florida, and they found weed in the car, and I was taken to big boy jail there. And so that was where I really started to reflect on, wow, I keep getting into trouble, and this question just came up of, am I a good person? Am I a good man? And then it transitioned into, well, what makes a good man? And that's really the question I've been asking myself for the last 18 years. That all started in a jail cell.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah, very
yeah,
powerful. Yeah,
yeah,
very like being very open and honest about that part of your journey, from that young age, 18, not really know who you are or what you're really doing with your life. It's a really important age, and I'm really interested to dive into that. But I think the
yeah.
question about am I a good man? Like where did this come from? And I mean, do you ask yourself that like even now? Like, is that something you really think about? Like, am I being the best version of me?
Yeah, I do. It's less prevalent today because, and I speak about this a lot. It's not about being a perfect man. Nobody's perfect, and you should never strive to perfection, or you'll drive yourself insane because there's no such thing. But being a good man, there are fundamentals that I have addressed over the years that do go into that. And I think the two things that I've distilled from my journey is having good character and having a purpose for your life, right? And those can orient yourself in a way that leads you on to being on that path of, yeah, all in all, I feel like I'm a good man. And having really strong women in my life, grandmothers and aunts and my mom and my sister, probably made that question even more prevalent throughout my life because I want to represent them well. I want, I'm a protector of the women in my life, and so yeah, I wrote a letter to my sister when I was 18 because I felt like I was failing her. She looked up to me.
Mm,
She's a younger sister, and as much as the internet will tell you, well, don't care what anybody thinks, and that's a good message when you're creating content or you're putting yourself out there, because you shouldn't care about what the masses think. But I'm a firm believer that there's a small circle of people that if they think, you know, they think wrongly of you, or you're not, living up to your end of the bargain of being a great brother, a great husband, that should matter.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it's very like important in your life that you are, seen to be so supportive for the rest of your family. That's amazing that you can see that.
Yes.
I want to talk about
Yes.
how you got here because obviously I found you on TikTok because I was,
Yeah.
scrolling and saw you and talking about something that most people don't really talk about. What really made you start creating and what was that journey actually like?
Yeah, great question. So I had just come off the heels of a huge life transition. I was living in Chicago. I moved to Dallas for my girlfriend at the time. And when that ended, I was also dealing with some family stuff. My grandmother had passed away. She was the real matriarch of the family. I mean, she brought so much wisdom into all of our lives. And we had dealt with, a handful of deaths sadly in my family, and so it was just a really tough time. And I was here in South Florida, and there was a documentary that came out called Inside the Manosphere, and it was a collection of guys, who are on the internet, who have a really influential following amongst young men. And I felt like the one message that stood out to me was the disparagement of women as a gender, and that hit really close to home. And I felt compelled to say something. My grandmother had always encouraged me to speak my mind. We would get into debate to tons of debates on politics, on all worldly things. And she was always just a huge champion in making sure that my voice gets heard. And I decided one day to just get on TikTok and do just that, speak my mind. And little did I know, it was the post that went viral. I had one post up at the time on TikTok, and it went completely viral. And I had a lot of people reaching out, moms, women, men, just saying that, hey, thank you for speaking up about this important issue. It was a real voice of reason, and it was necessary for everything going on in the world. And so that was my real
Mm.
impetus to getting started. Is it became not about me, it became about a mission, outwardly, it's that I can just do my part, for the rest of the world.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that for sure.
Yeah.
Having a mission and it's bigger than you. And it clearly resonates because, you've grown pretty quickly in a short amount of time. So that tells me the
Yeah.
audience is listening. And
Right.
especially around, the masculinity and what it means to be a good man. It's not easy to talk about on social media. There is so much noise. There's so much like everyone's got different views on that. How do you really
Right.
cut through about like what you really want to say and really leaning into that authenticity?
Well, I think you just nailed it. Authenticity is such a key to life.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of opportunities to get on social media and perform. But when that camera cuts off, how do you feel about yourself? Right. And I am very in touch with who I am as a person, considering the places that I was previously in my life and the hardships that existed. That, the masculinity conversation is really interesting because, for the last 5 to 10 years, we've had a divergence of what masculinity actually is. And I think there's two camps. There's the camp that says, you know, steer away from your true masculinity because, that's, harmful and it can be toxic. And there are toxic aspects of that for sure. But I think it diverged too far into the other direction. And then there's the hyper masculine, where you're only considered masculine if you're quote unquote alpha, if you're big, if you're strong, if you
Yeah.
command a presence. And I just don't believe that to be the case, because that suppresses, Carl Jung and a bunch of different thinkers out there have always made the case that every human being has a bit of masculine and feminine within themselves. And so, again, coming from such a strong background of women, I've been lucky to have a bit of both, the right formula for both, where, I am competitive, I'm ambitious, all of the traits that you would see in, I guess, your true masculine guys. But I also come from a place of needing to communicate with women because I want to hear their voices. So a lot of empathy, a lot of listening, and just heart to heart conversations allows me to, I think, channel both.
Mm. Yeah, that's a powerful duo, and I can speak the same for women. We sometimes sit so heavily in the masculine that we're not really tapping into our feminine. So I do think there is a
Right.
a contrast with both, and like
Yeah.
having that almost that balance, to be able to have that healthy relationship with self. And I
Right.
guess for you, what have you found really interesting since sharing your story or your personal views on TikTok, and how has that really been for you behind the scenes?
I guess what I've found so interesting is just the power, and people talk about this all the time, but the power of one post, right?
Yep.
The power of putting yourself out there, in all its courage that it does take initially,
Hmm.
to say what you feel, but the responses, right? Just knowing that, when I first started this journey, and I made that first post, which led into the second post that blew up. I said, if I can help one person today, if one person resonates with my ideas and it helps them, then I've done my job. And now you can get carried away with that because, of course, attention and metrics and views, and you want to grow. But I think anybody who's starting off, should just keep that one idea in mind. If you can go out there and help one person, through your phone, that's a very powerful idea. So
Mm.
yeah, I would say just getting familiar with this, this newfound position that I'm in, which is still relatively small, but knowing that I have a voice that matters and people want to hear more of it, and vice versa, right? I think the most exciting part about this journey is I get to have conversations like this with you, and we get to connect the dots, for people out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely. I saw the synergy. Even though we all like have different missions, we still have a mission of like service to help. For me,
Correct.
also the younger generation of like, what does that really mean? And mine's more about stepping into that purpose and that big dream. What is your reality of the life you want to live? And I
Right.
think we should speak about what it makes a good man today, because the big question is, we're in 2026, social media, dating apps, changing gender dynamics, men's movements. There's just so much going on right now. And we're both in the creator world. What does it mean to actually be a good man in today's
Hmm.
society?
Yeah. I think it's about service, for others. It's getting out of yourself and really trying to understand the people, that make up our communities. Because everybody at the end of the day has their own insecurities and hurts and failures and things that they wrestle with every single day. And the moment that you look across the table from someone, and I know it's hard because we're all on our phones, right? And so it just goes
Yeah.
out into the abyss. But you have moms and you have fathers and you have brothers and sisters and friends. And so you understand that this journey is wrought with highs and lows throughout life. And so I think if we can get back to this basic understanding of, hey, this is what humanity is all about. It's about being there for each other and giving each other grace, right? Having
Mm.
patience with one another, and really seeing the other person as someone who doesn't have it all figured out. I think that's part of just being a good man, is having that understanding, for other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, just from my perspective, I think a lot of people wear a mask in a relationship, in a career,
Yeah,
meeting somebody new. It's like we're always trying to hide that aspect of ourselves. And I think just being open and honest about what you really stand for and who you really are. And I think a lot of people find that hard for that connection to self. So if
right.
you were talking to a man right now, maybe your younger self at the age of 18, what would you like to say to him at that age?
I would say, as it relates to dating or in
Yeah,
general.
dating and life. Yeah, stepping into what they really want to do and who they are.
Well, I would say you have to put yourself out there as much as possible, and you will get back what you put out tenfold if you stay true to who you are, right? And I know that sounds all,
Mm,
kitschy and like, but it's, I can only speak from my experience because, yeah, I've failed plenty of times. But what it taught me about myself throughout that process is invaluable. And so, rather than putting on a mask and performing for what you think other people want to hear, you will find your tribe. You will find whether that's community, whether that's business partners, whether that's your future wife, you will have way more success if you find alignment in who you are in other people, right? So you want to be
mm,
as aligned as possible with who you are, which in turn will lead you towards other people that think like you, that act like you, that want the same things as you. Because, I'm sure we've all had those mistakes, especially in relationships, where you get to the end of the road and you say, well, gosh, there were so many things that were off and our values didn't even really align. And maybe that's
yeah.
just because we put the mask on in the beginning because we want to impress people.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I work on. The
Yeah.
good girl, the programming of like, I just want to achieve, I just want to please everybody. And it's like, no, actually, what do you stand for? Like what is not okay with you? Like what is your boundary? And this is so important for men and women. You can't just be like, oh well, I'll let them go, I'll let them get away with it. Um,
Right.
I mean, this is
Right.
something that I hear on a daily basis, and I'm talking about it now because it came up in my coaching, but the red
Yeah.
flags like in a relationship or they start to come through and yet I'm talking from a woman's perspective, why we ignore them at the beginning and why we
Mhm.
continue to not see them, and maybe that someone is really not aligned with us and we choose to ignore them.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think red flags, as it relates to your audience,
Yes.
of women, I would say because I have some really good girlfriends, but
Yep.
most importantly, my sister means the world to
Mm,
me, and so I get to hear all of her dating stories. And I would say the one thing that stands out to me, the biggest red flag in terms of being a good predictor of whether this person's going to be right for you, is whether that man is interested, truly interested in what you have to say, right? Is
mm,
he a good listener? And you can find this out because I've heard this, through experience and examples. In the first date or two, if he's talking 95% of the time and he hasn't once asked you about yourself, about your life, about who you are as a person, I would say that that's a really good indicator of what the rest of the relationship is going to look like.
absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely lean into that and do not ignore them when they show up. Like really like think about, again, it comes back down to your boundaries and seeing like what is
Yes.
it not working and why, like really listen to that at the beginning. I mean, I talk a lot about intuition and leading from that. Like it's always there and listening. And
Right.
I know
And
with you, you
we
work.
all get caught up. Yeah, sorry to
Hmm.
cut you off, but
No,
we
it's
all
okay.
get caught up in the things that are right in front of us, right? It's someone's
Yeah.
attractive and they're charismatic and you guys have really good chemistry, and that shouldn't be ignored, right? Those are important qualities and inputs to evaluate somebody by. But again, that is just surface level stuff. And the stuff that really are good indicators of whether you guys are going to be compatible and great long-term friends is the best friend stuff, right? And that's really what you want to hone in on in terms of your, like you said, your intuition. Do you have that
Hmm.
best friend vibe with one another? Do you share the same weirdness, right? Once you get down to the weirdness
Yeah.
of another person, and you guys click and you can laugh and just be silly, those are the right things to complete the full picture.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. I actually want to talk about something we spoke about earlier, is about this. I saw it in a podcast not what like recently, about men and this lonely epidemic that we're going through that nobody's really talking about, especially the younger generation. I don't know about in the US, but in the UK right now, especially men coming out of like university, there is a huge amount not having jobs right now, and we are less connected than ever. What is actually happening, and why are so many men in isolation?
Well, there's too many things to really talk about as it relates to men. I mean, you just addressed it. Yeah, the education is down. A lot less men are graduating from university. But then, we have the phone. And online gambling is become a
Yeah.
huge issue for young men, and that's highly correlated with suicide rates amongst men. Gaming and porn, and then social media and wanting status. So there is a flood of different aspects to the phone that are calling for young men's attention. And so if you are not truly aligned with who you are and what you want to do in life and your purpose, these things will get in the way of a lot of young men, and it will delude them into thinking that this is where they should be spending their time, and it won't harm them in the long run. So, and I think that we're seeing the residuals of that in terms of the loneliness epidemic that you just addressed. I mean, if you're it'll hurt your confidence too if you're constantly inside your home. If you're
Yeah.
on your phone, that confidence is going to hurt. You're not going to go out into the world. You're not going to go try to date. You're not going to go out and say, look, I'll go get rejected by women, and it's okay. It's okay. But you
Hmm.
put yourself out there and you look for, I guess, for love.
Yeah, for sure. Like, keep going out there, keep, not settling. Like, that's one thing as a younger generation. Don't settle for like what's around you right now. That doesn't have to be your reality. And I speak about this all the time. You can create whatever you want from your life. If you
That's
want to go and
right.
live in a different country or go and travel, like one of the biggest things that changed my life is that traveling aspect. Maybe that isn't for you, but find something that you're really passionate about and lean more into it. That is one thing that I spoke to like the younger generation about, and lean into what you're really good at.
Yeah.
What do you
Yeah.
think is a misconception right now? I mean, I know men and women, they think kind of differently, but I would say there is a little bit of a disconnection of what, men kind of stand for and what women kind of stand for. What do you see is actually happening right there?
Good question. Have you ever heard of this term called hypergamy?
No.
Okay. Well, it's a term that's been abused, in my opinion, in the online spaces. And essentially, what it says is that women go for the top 5% of all men in terms of status, in terms of look, in
Mm,
terms of finances. And I think on the extreme men's side, they've again abused that to say that all women will only go after, this top tier, top 1% caliber of men. And I would just say the biggest misconception is that, look, like women want just a man who's competent, right? Competence is a big thing. They want someone who has actual direction for their life. And to prove that he'll be a good partner who can take care of her and as well as the family. And so it's not this
yeah,
only, women are out there seeking, this transactional nature between men and women. I just think it's right that women would want a guy who they're impressed by, who can take care of them and their nuclear family one day. And I think so. Anyways, that's a big misconception
yeah.
that I see, is that a lot of men blaming women for thinking this way, when you strip it all down, it's just logical that women want a good man who's gonna be a strong support system for her and the family.
Exactly. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. I think you're definitely looking for someone who, when things get hard, that you can lean on them for support and, be that family unit. If that's what you want, you need to know that at the beginning. It's really important. If you want a family, then say
Right.
it at the beginning. And if they don't, then that's also like something that you have to think about.
Yes.
Like, not everybody does.
Yes.
So
Right.
it's
Right.
important in
Yeah,
creating that
absolutely.
together.
Absolutely. Yeah. And having that emotional capacity too, right? That's another big thing that I think, men, on the far end of the spectrum, they can be too rigid. And a lot of women just need the emotional capacity. They need someone that they can come home to and they can talk about things with, and they won't feel shamed or um yeah, they just won't feel shamed for opening up, and having that partner is such a critical aspect that I think more men need to develop is the emotional capacity to have those
Yeah.
conversations with their partner.
Yeah, and I do think we're in a kind of a different generation. I'm seeing it from my point of view. I've worked with female founders. More women will want their own businesses. They want
Yeah.
independence. They want their own money. That's
Right.
great, but it can also be a little bit overpowering for a man who maybe not in that power right now. And they're like,
Right.
I that she's a bit stronger than me. I don't know how I feel about that. And
Right.
sometimes it's like, how can we get that balance that a man doesn't feel too overpowered by their woman, like shining in what she wants to do? Because we do have so much more accessibility right now of creating that freedom for ourselves.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Well, I've always said it. I mean, women, you can't put the genie back in the bottle, nor would we ever want to, right? We've reached a point where women have progressed, in an incredible fashion, up until this point, and that needs to be celebrated. I mean, I can't imagine, not having a partner who is joyful in their own progress, right? And so, yeah, maybe because of this transitional phase that men are in, some of them are, feeling a little insecure about that piece. But, to see, your partner, your woman, whoever you're dating light up because they have
yeah,
true passions and interests, and knowing how, okay, your role as a pure provider has changed, but that actually opens up the relationship, to a lot more beautiful things, that you can be there as a support system in other ways, and you don't have to feel, because we're allies at the end of the day. This isn't a
yeah,
competition, right? And so if you find that person who has their interests, who is building their own businesses in their life, that's something to be celebrated.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And I think a woman wants that supportive man. From like your key message, I guess the role men play in helping women thrive and being that divine. What
Right.
does that actually look like in practice?
Yeah, well, I think it's getting away from this idea of being just, I'm going to protect, I'm going to provide, I'm going to lead. Well, to some
Mm,
extent, women are doing that as well too. So that's just, it's a way for something to go viral on social media. But the way that men can do that is, again, being a true ally to seeing them as a friend. Like, how would you approach a friend, right? You wouldn't negate what they're doing out in the world just because it makes you feel, I guess, insecure. You would promote them in every way possible, and I think that's, I guess, the right disposition to take, as it relates to what a good man can do to support his person.
hmm
Yeah.
And I guess for the women listening right now, because I have friends, single, looking at relationships, and sometimes there
Yeah.
can be like one ick, like one thing that they're doing that isn't,
Right.
like it puts you off and that's it, you never text them
Right.
again. What's like the green flag that I guess we overlook sometimes when it actually is about being a good man and maybe we just oversee things and, we shouldn't just disregard them from like one thing that they've done.
Yeah. I would say if he is, there's a difference between being a boring person
Mm,
that doesn't provide any excitement in your life, and a man who is really dedicated and disciplined and is trying to further his career, and does, as when you have conversations, does really care about being with you and only you. And
mm,
how, yeah, that can look boring, but that's what creates an actual healthy relationship. And I would go a step further to say there are things that he should be doing. It's a random date night, right? Surprising you with flowers, right? There's ways to keep the relationship exciting without saying, "Hey, we're going to go to Ibiza every, 2 or 3
mhm.
weekends," right? There's a difference in terms of what you're actually looking for out of a man. Those would be green flags. Is that he is very much in himself and about, creating progress with you, and where you guys want to go in terms of your life goals.
Hmm. Definitely.
Yeah.
Life goals are so important. You've got to both
Yeah.
have individual and together life goals. You've got to be able to have your own. I say for women, you've got to be still in your own power. You've still got to have the
Right.
things you want to do, but allow someone else in, to soften you and allow you to let them in at a point where you feel like you're ready to let somebody in. Work on yourself, absolutely, but be ready and open for whenever that person comes through. I think we guard ourselves so much that we're like, when we reach this level, then I will allow somebody in. It's like, no, like be open
Right.
to all
And
possibilities.
growing. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And becoming. I think, the biggest misconception out there is that you'll find your person when you're ready. And ideally, I think that if you
Yep.
look at the best relationships, it's about the becoming, right? You become together, in an imperfect way because nobody is fully established in who they are. You're changing, all the time, and finding someone who is willing to evolve with you is one of the most special aspects of finding another person.
Yeah, for sure. Like
Yeah,
building
yeah,
together. That is a
building
powerful
together.
journey. Yeah. Yeah, I guess my last questions to you would be like, we spoke about like our mission. We both have separate missions. We're here for a bigger purpose. We have a calling.
Yeah,
It's amazing that we've been able to find that and lead through our voices. Both of our, we're growing. It's amazing. What is your mission? Like, what are you really here to do and who do you want to help and why?
yeah. My mission is, and I have it on my website now. It's more good men. And it's not a criticism necessarily of men in general. It's just constantly raising the bar for ourselves, right? Never settling for the status quo or who we are today, knowing that we can continue to be better, to serve more people, to create lifelong missions that ultimately give back to our communities and to the people that love us. So more
Mm.
good men is really my mission, and I'm big into human connection. So any ways that we can continue to bridge the outrage machine that exists, and get back to the humanity of ourselves, is something that we can all strive for.
Yeah, and I fully support that because I'm here for the women, but I also, something I said recently, we need more men like you in this space, supporting especially the younger generation of men. So I think you're going to do amazing at what you're doing.
Yeah,
And I guess a
yeah,
more
thanks.
personal question to you is, you are creating, you've started your business. I want you to be super honest about
Okay.
what do you still struggle with and what are you still working on in within yourself?
Yeah, yeah. Certainly just the content creation aspect of
Mm,
it. I've been in ad tech sales most of my career. So sitting across from people, understanding, how they think, what they want out of life, and trying to find alignment in person is something that I've always excelled at. But sitting in front of a camera and creating content without anybody in the room certainly been a struggle, and then putting yourself out there in the most vulnerable sense, right? Because yeah, you say that my message is resonating, and that's humbling, but that also requires me to go against the grain a little bit of what a lot of men out there preach, right? It's being vulnerable, it's showing empathy, it's showing this, I guess, softer side of myself, and that has been it's been tough. It's definitely been a struggle to get up every day and put that out there.
I can totally
Yeah.
relate. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I struggle with that myself, like face the camera, what do I actually want to say? How does it land? And being open to criticism. I've had some
Right.
people say, like just some really nasty things. You've got to be able
Yeah.
to be okay with not always the good things coming through, and that's just the
Right.
nature of what we're doing. And yeah, power to you to be getting up every day and just be consistent. Like the
Yeah.
journey is
Thanks.
consistency. Boring consistency over time is what creates that next
Yes.
chapter. And I think we spoke earlier is, most people, I was talking about the podcast that most episodes finish at 10 or 20 episodes because
Right.
you don't see the results yet, and it takes time to see that results. And for you, it's just a journey of like you're on the becoming journey, and probably in a
Right.
year's time, you're going to be very different again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Exactly.
building.
Yeah. Doing things before you're ready. Right. We know that to be the case. I certainly go through my own bouts of, well, no, I need to prepare more, or I need, another, maybe I'll push this out a
Yeah.
week, but you know. getting on here and just having these conversations. And to your point, knowing that, hey, you are where you are today and look forward to where you'll be in a year. And I think taking that mindset of having that just, optimism about yourself and your growth and your career is a really good foundation for anyone to create.
Mm, definitely. And I think I would just like to ask you, well, one or two final
Yeah.
questions, but without the content, the following, the mission, everything that you're creating right now, who is Alex beneath all of that? Like, what do you really stand for?
To be honest, that's what I really stand for. I mean, it really is. I could never have done what I've done, and this has been 3 months, if I didn't fully believe and I didn't show up as my most authentic self. So everything that you'll hear from me from here on out, it may be cringy, it may be met with criticism. There may be people that disagree, and I'm open. I'm always open. I would say the one thing about me is I'm always open to hearing disagreements. I need to hear other people's
Yes.
thoughts because it challenges the way I think. I mean, I sit with my own thoughts 24/7 every day, right? So I know exactly what I think. And the only way that I can improve and get better is if I hear other inputs. And so, yeah, I'm always open to what other people have to say. And if that can change my thinking, I'm all for it.
Yeah, me too. Always being open, curious, stay interested, always question, always answer, like see what's actually going on. And we're in this world of constantly learning and growing. So yeah,
Yes.
no credit to that. And I think my last question would be, as you are
Yeah.
on Dream Big with Amy, I'm all about the big dream, thinking as big as you possibly can, anything that scares you. Have you got a dream right now that you would like to share with us, business, personal?
Yeah. I One day I hope to see myself on stage delivering an incredible speech about my mission, about my purpose, and have it resonate with hundreds of thousands of people in a stadium. That would make me feel extremely fulfilled, mainly because it's outwardly focused. If my message reaches that amount of people and I get to that point in life, I will have felt an extreme fulfillment in who I became, and how it all really started from just a small room, with one TikTok.
Exactly. Yeah. And
Yeah,
being on Dream Big with Amy or one of your podcasts. No, I fully support that. And I can see that happening for you. I'm sure it will. You've
yeah,
already speaking it into existence,
yeah.
like the manifestation part of like it is already going to happen. It's already out there. That future
Yeah,
version of you is already doing that.
right.
Amazing. And I'd love to for everyone to connect with you and share with like where you're like the best way to reach you and what your coaching is right
Handles.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So coaching, you can find me at alexgrainer.com. I coach both moms who are raising sons in the digital age, as well as a mentorship for young men. So alexgrainer.com is where you can find me, and then my handles on both TikTok as well as Instagram is at the Alex Greaner.
Amazing. Yeah, everything will be posted below. But I guess for me, just thank you so much for being so open and honest and coming on here and being the first male on my podcast anyway and sharing that
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, yeah, I'm humbled. Thank you for having me on.
You're so welcome. And to everyone listening, if this moves you or share it with somebody who may need to hear this right now, a son, a brother, a dad, a friend, because I think the world needs more of this, more honesty, more men feeling seen in the right way. And to the men listening right now, thank you for being here too. You are being willing to ask the questions. Showing up as a good man is already the answer within you. So, as always, keep dreaming big, and I will see you in the next episode.